hear us okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so if you guys have questions, you might want to get within camera view. I know some of you are on the side out here, so you might want to roll your chair in if you do have a question, or I can try to go this way a little bit. Oh, you know what? If you have a question, just raise your hand and look what I can do. I can do it. Okay. All right. So Mr. Shell is here. He's the author of the book that you all just have had the pleasure of reading, and we've been discussing it here today. We've gone over a little bit of discussion here in class. And so if you don't mind, Mr. Shell, they all might have some questions for you. So I'm going to open it up to you guys. If anybody has a question, please feel free. Just wave your hand. Yep, we have one right here.
Where did your inspiration for this story come from?
The story is based on the actual events of my life, and I kind of found that this issue of divorce really needed a lot more attention. You know, it's become kind of normalized, and to most kids going through it, it's anything but normal. And so I began work in this area of marriage strengthening and divorce reducing. And people kind of kept asking me, you know, why do you have such a passion for this issue? And my story was painful, and so I finally kind of said, you know what, I'm going to answer the question. It wasn't a 30-second answer, so it took a book to kind of give the answer.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, we have one over here. Go over to if I can reach you.
I know, like in the book, and for instance, but like other than the book and like your experiences, have you noticed that like when it comes to divorce, that children either get split up like without them having any say in it, or do you think that like there's more of the lines like they choose a parent to kind of stay from one side or the other?
So are you talking about siblings being split up, or just kind of choosing a parent?
A little bit of both. Like, have you noticed that like the siblings usually have more say in it, or do you think it's kind of like the parents that are just like for instance in the book, like the dad went with his daughter and everything?
Yeah, it's very rare that the siblings will get split up. Although sometimes, you know, like so Gil and Deborah in the book, there was 8 years between them. So, you know, if the siblings are real close in age, it's certainly rare that they're going to be split up. And it's rare in general that they'll be split up. But, you know, if there's a big gap in age, that certainly could happen when one gets older and one wants to go live with the other parent. You know, as far as kids choosing, you know, again, you know, this book was written from the perspective where the children, you know, this was back in the 1970s where divorce wasn't anywhere near as prevalent as it is today. And so, you know, kids have a lot more say today, but still, you know, at the end of the day, for as, you know, quote unquote, normalized divorce has become, there's still just raw emotion involved. And you know, parents, I think each parent wants the kids to live with them because they want to and they care and they love their kids. And yet at the same time, you know, they want one up on the other parent. So, you know, I think kids definitely have a little more say today, but they're still caught in the middle. And you know, kids struggle with the same emotions of wanting to please each parent. You know, so, you know, I think they do and they don't have a say.
One out here.
Kind of going off of that, Deborah tells Gil that she had to go up and testify, but Gil didn't have that option. Is there like a reason, like kind of why? Was it like the age or?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was largely a function of age. And, you know, again, you can certainly, you know, make a claim that, you know, when parents start putting kids in court to testify, you know, unless there's some, you know, extreme, I mean, unless there's abuse involved or something like that, then obviously, obviously as painful as it would be for a child to testify, he or she certainly should if that's necessary. But, in your kind of run-of-the-mill garden variety divorce, which is what most divorces are, starting to drag the kids. I mean, it's one thing for the kids to be in the middle of it, which stinks in general. But when you start dragging kids into testifying in court, you've really driven a wedge between the child and the other parent, and maybe a wedge was there, and so now you've just exacerbated that. Really, like I said, in your kind of typical divorce, nothing good comes from one child testifying against the other parent. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. So I was wondering that if in the instance, since Deborah had to, why didn't they also bring in Gil?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part. Someone was coughing.
Since Deborah said that she had to, why then didn't Gil also?
Well, I think he didn't really know it was an option for him, and Deborah was aligned with the father, and Gil was aligned with the mother, and Deborah certainly wanted to be away from the mother, and the father wanted that for Deborah. Gil didn't know. Gil was, again, when you talk about an 8-year difference, and I don't think Gil knew what testify even was. He knew it was an option, knew he could speak up, knew, he had any say or voice, in court or out of court. Gil didn't feel that, he had any sort of voice.
Okay, we have one. Way in the back there. Yeah.
What kind of psychological effects do you think occur as a result of living with either a mother or a father?
That's certainly a good question. A child. The bottom line is a child needs both parents, and that's why it's ideal that a child live with both parents, because you just get, obviously boys get certain things from their father and certain things from their mother. Girls the same, get certain things from their mother, certain things from their father. And so, I think that a lot of damage is done in any divorce. And obviously again, this story kind of occurred, 40 years ago. So, in the divorces that are going on today, there's so many more of them. And so I think kids today have a lot more acceptance amongst their peers, but I don't think anything's changed in 50 years as far as what kids need from both their parents. And so I think a lot of damage is done. And I think in today's culture where divorce is so normalized, a lot of that damage gets masked, because on the outside, I think there's pressure on kids today to kind of say everything's okay and to kind of go along with the flow. And so many of their friends are from divorced families, so they're not kind of social outcasts. And I think that, I know like you guys have read about sleeper effects and things like that. And I think that's a really large issue in divorce. And I think that we're going to come to see, years from now, that was a large issue in kind of the divorce culture that's going on right now and has been going on. Because I think that there's a lot of damage that, goes on that really will come out in adult relationships. And I think that's where you'll see it, because I think, we've gotten to a place where, yes, for a child of divorce, there are higher instances of drug abuse, teen pregnancy, aggression, things like that. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen in intact families. And that's not to say that kids of divorce can't do well in school and careers, because they do. But universally, the problems will come out in their adult relationships. And that's where a lot of the psychological damage is done. And like I said, I think it's the issue of the sleeper effects is a very big issue.
Okay, we have one. I think, whoops, can you see you on there? Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that splitting up the children is typically rare in divorce cases. So I was wondering why you chose to make that choice to split up Deborah and Gil in your book? Does that come from personal experience?
Yes, that comes from that. I said the book was, based on actual events, and that was an actual event occurrence.
Oh, one here in the middle.
I was wondering if you think it's common for parents to connect more with the opposite gender children, like in the case of the dad and Deborah, or is that just more of personal experience?
Well, I think that's personal experience, and I think I don't know. Obviously, every family is unique unto themselves. Every relationship, in some cases, fathers have great relationships with sons. Again, whether you're talking about intact families or not, there are families where fathers and sons have great relationships, but other families, fathers and sons have lousy relationships. Likewise, mothers and daughters, daughters and fathers, sons and mothers, etc. I don't think, again, divorce doesn't help any of this. Obviously, ideal in any situation, really best for a child to have a great relationship with their mother and father. And again, so, we kind of come back to, not to put it into kind of statistical terms, but, the odds of something. The odds are much better that a child is going to have a great relationship with both parents if that marriage stays intact. Again, that doesn't mean that that's an absolute statement.
Okay. Oh, Karen, I think she had her hand up first. Yeah, there you go.
I know you said you often felt the divorce could have been your fault. Did your parents actually make you feel like that, or was that more like an internal feeling?
Oh, I would say that for the most part, parents generally don't overtly try and make a child feel like it's their fault. That's not to say that those instances don't exist. But again, in the kind of global universe of divorces, most parents, overtly, consciously don't make a child feel like it's their fault. Nevertheless, a lot of their subconscious behavior, a lot of, tacit kind of, behavior leads a child to believe, that it's his or her fault. A child just is, in some senses, is naturally going to go that direction, on their own, because, they don't have an understanding yet of adult relationships and especially a marriage. So, they don't really understand what's gone on in the marriage to lead it to where it is. So it's just kind of a default that a child is going to question themselves and what's their role in it. They obviously, again, whether it's, on an intellectual basis, but more of on an emotional basis, they know they have a role in the family. They're a part of the family, and the family is broken up, and so they don't have an understanding of the adult relationship. So they're going to certainly question themselves. And I think most children do, whether they admit it to themselves or not, whether they realize it or not. I think most do.
How did you come up with your title Without a Chair?
Well, it was based off, it has two meanings, really. It's based off of the game of musical chairs. And so that's kind of really what divorce has become today. And in particular, remarriage has really become a big issue within the overall concept of divorce. And I think right now we're in a place where, it's what's presented to the world is this kind of happy, everything's wonderful, Brady Bunch kind of thing. There's his kids, her kids, and, we've got this one big happy blended family and everything's just wonderful. But in that, kind of, like I said, so you basically, again, follow this scenario where now you have a father, and, he doesn't see his kids as much as the mother does, or as he'd like to, but now he marries a woman, and so she's got her kids more than her ex-husband does. And so now this guy is spending more time with his new wife's kids than he is with his own kids. Likewise, the other way around. So it's gotten to be, this one big game of musical chairs. And so somewhere in this, again, we've presented to the world this kind of everything's wonderful Brady Bunch kind of thing, but someone pays a price someplace, and someone's left without a chair. It may be, figuratively as opposed to literally. There isn't enough. Again, if someone has 2 kids and then the new spouse has 3 kids, now there's 5. There just isn't enough time. Where everyone's needs are met. So somewhere there's this game of musical chairs, and somewhere someone's left without a chair. Also, the other kind of meaning behind it is just building the foundation. And as you're talking about adolescent development in here, you're building, adolescents are building the foundation for the rest of their lives. So much of what goes on in adolescence, forms those building blocks. And kind of those legs of the chair are really important as they're being developed, even at your age, kind of toward the end of adolescence, or what's they call now emerging adulthood. And you're, building the legs of your chair. And if things kind of aren't going the way they're supposed to, you could end up losing a leg or 2, or could end up, if all goes, wrong, could end up losing all the legs. And I think the story of Without a Chair, it's an extreme story. It's not the typical divorce story. However, in that extreme story, you find the concepts that are universal to all divorces and what children are going through, what adults are going through, etc.
You kind of touched on this, but you said divorce has become more of a prevailing issue in today's society and becoming more of a norm. Do you have an idea like what the trigger is, whether divorces are becoming more recurring?
I'm sorry, the last part of your question?
Do you have an idea what the trigger is of why like divorces are becoming more recurring in today's society compared to like?
Oh, I think there's several reasons to that. I mean, I think that again, we've kind of, as I touched on earlier, we've portrayed the outcome of divorce as a good outcome. That, okay, basically you grieve for a year and then everybody, get on with life. And so everybody gets, remarriage and everything looks, there doesn't, so if you talk about a car accident, and you drive past a car accident and you see carnage and wreckage, we don't want you to see any more carnage or wreckage from a divorce. We have this expectation and there's pressure on, as I mentioned before, there's pressure on the kids, there's pressure on everyone to everything's fine, nothing to see here, move along. And so I think we've created this kind of false sense of where everything just kind of turns out okay. And I think, it becomes also, there's a study that was done at a University of Texas that talked about, the so-called good divorce. And like I said, there's so much pressure today to have a good divorce. And the bar thus is lowered for kids who come from those good divorces. Like I said, they don't see horrible outcomes. And so they see, okay, mom's, remarried, dad's remarried, everything's great. So when they get into their own adult relationships, marriages, all of a sudden, problems that once people would work through, all of a sudden they give up a lot sooner and say, you know what, we'll just get divorced because there's really not going to be a problem. So I think that's the largest trigger, is that we've created this kind of divorce culture where there's so much pressure on everyone to look fine, everything's fine. And as I said, there's a lot going on underneath the surface in children and adults. A lot of problems that still exist.
Yeah, right behind.
Besides having the feeling that your father cared more about your sibling, how do you think that his absence
How do I think his absence what?
affected you? Besides like having like the feeling of like him caring more about like.
Oh, I think it had a huge effect. I mean, just, from probably the single largest thing was a lack of confidence. And obviously, you'll get later on in your class to, things like independence and autonomy and achievement and things like those kind of topics. And I think, I think that Gil, on one hand, Gil was forced to deal with a lot of adolescent things earlier, and he was forced to think through a lot of things, and unfortunately, he didn't have the good coping mechanisms, to kind of navigate his way through those things. And so, I think that when you look in terms of adolescent development, I think that everything that could have gone wrong for Gil's, internal growth went wrong. And so I think that had his father been in his life, I think it would have, again, no guarantees of anything in life. You never know what's down the other road. But Gil would have, Gil again was different today. Gil was a social outcast. He was the only kid on the block from divorced, family. That's not true today. But again, I certainly maintain that the same issues are going on, whether they're expressed or not, and expressed in good ways or not good ways. That that feeling of being a part of a family, your role in that family, your place. You could be having trouble with friends and things like that in school, but boy, you have this safe place at home where you're part of this unit, and there's no greater feeling in the world than being a part of that family unit. And obviously, it not a cure-all for all the other problems out in the world that you have to face, but that home base, being solid, gives you a lot of confidence to go out in the world with.
Anybody else? Yeah, in the way back there.
What do you want the overall takeaway message to be from your book?
That's a really good question. I'm not after people making a judgment on divorce. I'm not after people saying, oh, divorce is wrong or divorce is right. Or what I'm after is people to kind of take a pause and say, okay, we've had the past 50 years of this divorce culture. Okay, what's gone right? What's gone wrong? And like I said, I think there's, I think we were in a place, again, I think, I look at, and you guys might not kind of necessarily have a firsthand experience with this, but there was a level of commitment, when you go back 50 years that was really outstanding. That doesn't exist today. Today is a very portable, disposable society. There was a level of commitment that existed years ago that was really wonderful. There weren't a lot of tools because there will always be problems in marriages. Every home on the block has problems. Every relationship has problems. If you get married, it's not a matter of if you're going to have problems, it's when, because all relationships have problems. It's how you handle it. It's how you work through it. It's who you are. And so, I think that it's just kind of working through things, and that's where where today we have so many more tools to work through things and so many more tools that would sustain marriages, but we've lost that level of commitment. And so to me, if you kind of marry the level of commitment that existed years ago with the tools available today, I think you'd see marriages thrive. I think you'd see the divorce rate, go down dramatically. But that level of commitment doesn't exist today for a lot of the reasons we've talked about, already today. And so, like I said, what I'm after is people to just take a pause. Like, what have we done? Where have we gone? How did we get here? Do we want to continue down this road or not? There are sociologists out there who predict marriage will become obsolete in the next 50, 60, 70 years. Some may think that's a good thing. I personally don't, and I, you know, again, whether you guys whether marriage is in your plans or not in your plans. I venture to guess having kids is in most of your plans. And again, marriage, kids used to kind of happen within a marriage, and that's not the case anymore today. And you know, I would argue that that's not a good thing. I can understand why your generation has soured as much on marriage as it has. And my goal is for us to fix that, not to just, I don't think the road we're going down is a good road. But again, everyone, you know, who's gotten divorced, there's raw emotion. There's, you know, having judgment on the issue of divorce isn't productive. Like I said, I'm all for strengthening marriages and reducing divorces. I don't want to have judgment because everyone, you know, nobody's walked in anyone else's shoes. But I think we should really take a pause and kind of assess. And like I said, I think if we really were to truly do that, have more conversations like this, I think we'd really find out that we're not going down a good road, and there's still time to kind of, you know, for us all to go down a better road.
Yeah, one question.
For kids whose parents have undergone divorces, what kind of things can they do to kind of minimize like psychological or emotional damage that might affect them in the future?
I'm sorry, is your question for divorces that have already occurred? What can parents do?
No, what can the kids do if they don't have a good relationship with the parents? How can they minimize damage to themselves?
Wow, that's a hard question. You know, obviously, you know, through siblings or other relatives or you know, people in their life, obviously finding people that they can trust to be able to talk to. I think that's, you know, clearly the single biggest thing that a child can do. And again, if you look at Gil's case, you know, he was left to his own thoughts, and his own thoughts really weren't productive. And so, you know, feeling isolated is never a good thing. So I would say the best thing that someone can do if they can't talk to their parents is to find someone they can talk to and not feel alone and not feel isolated, and you know, try and just reach out to whatever avenue exists.
Does anybody else have a question? So we only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to jump in and ask my question really quick. Hi, David.
Hi, Jill.
So my question that I thought of while you guys were all discussing was, I don't know if you're familiar with the new nesting scenario that some—
Yes, very familiar.
Okay, so if you guys aren't familiar, this is where some parents are, as they're going through the separation or divorce process, sometimes one parent, they won't divide up the kids from the home. Instead of one parent will stay in the home, and then the parents rotate the house. Instead of making the kids go from house to house, the kids stay in the house that they've been raised in, and then the mom, it's different, right? The mom comes and stays for like a week and then leaves and goes to the apartment or wherever, and then the dad comes and stays for a week. So my question is, what are your feelings on that? And do you feel like if Gil was raised in that kind of nesting environment, do you think his development would have been any different?
Well, I am, like I said, my number one thing is I think parents should stay together and fix their marriage. And however, if divorces occur, I am a huge proponent of nesting. I think that it is truly what is best for the child. It's what's most inconvenient for the adults. And, you know, it's very rare. There have been a few cases, one in Michigan and one in Wisconsin that I know of, where it's been ordered. It's rare that it happens, and it's even rarer that it's ordered. But there have been a few cases where it's ordered. And again, what nesting is really inconvenient for the parents, really inconvenient for them to have new relationships, and to which I say, I don't really care. It's inconvenient to finances. Someone will say, okay, well, now we basically have to support 3 homes. My answer to the parents there is, I don't care if you sleep on a park bench while you're not there. Because this is what's truly best for a child, given that a divorce has occurred. I really think it should be the default position of any court that when a divorce, comes before a judge, I think that should be the default position because, like I said, that's what's easiest for the kids. And I think it also lends itself, truly, not to get off on a whole rabbit trail, but I touched on it earlier. The issue with divorce isn't so much divorce as remarriage. That's where we've gone as a society, and that's what's really fueled the divorce culture, is that there are good outcomes. If all of a sudden divorce was a lot harder on parents, then they might kind of look back towards each other. If they still had to kind of interact with each other, obviously the nesting also, not only is it easier to have easier on the kids, it's easier to facilitate family time as a complete unit. Where all of a sudden it's not just mom's in the house and then dad's in the house, but maybe there's some times on a crossover or whatever, that there's a family meal or things like that. Anything that can promote reconciliation, anything that can, promote fixing this family unit is what's best for the child. And so I am a huge proponent of nesting, and I think it should be court ordered default, de facto in every single case. And I think you'd see a reduction in the divorce rate. But, it's not going to happen because, we are all about adults' rights. And kids have few rights, and, court systems generally do not serve kids well. Not blaming the court system, it's not set up to deal with personal relationships. It's just the courts do as best a job as the courts can do. They're just out of their league. They see people have this kind of feeling about the court system as, I'm going to go tell the court the truth, and they're going to find this. A judge deals with so many cases. The judge never knows who these people. You're just a case. You're just a number. You're just another case. And so the courts do not serve families well, do not serve kids well. And if they were to order nesting, not to say that they wouldn't present a whole host of problems, because you have to really, still fix the problems that were going on. But I think it would really help kids a lot and help reduce the divorce rate.
Well, thank you, David, for doing that. And thanks, guys, for your questions. And I will see you all. We won't see Mr. Shelley, but I will see you all on Thursday. Have a great Wednesday. And thanks again, Mr. Shell, for meeting us today. And
thank you.
For the books.